Hi everyone, Niall Paterson here. Over the next 3 episodes, we're going to be taking a look back at 2024 for King Charles and Queen Camilla, Prince William and Catherine, and Prince Harry and Meghan. The first of our series on the royal year, focusing entirely on the King and his Queen. The Sky News Daily, back after this.
The world is becoming increasingly complex and volatile. How can we make sense of it all?
I'm Richard Engel.
And I'm Yalda Hakim.
And we present Sky News' latest podcast, The World. Each week, we'll cut through the noise to guide you through the week's global events and explain to you why what happens out there matters to you wherever you are.
We're on the ground in some of the world's toughest places. Listen now to The World with Richard Engel and me, Yalda Hakim, wherever you get your podcasts.
From cancer diagnosis to Commonwealth protests, the royal family have had a royally challenging year.
Diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. His Majesty has today commenced a schedule of regular treatments, during which time he has been advised by doctors to postpone public-facing duties.
Still only in his second year as monarch, the King had to step back for cancer treatment, with Camilla, don't forget a once vilified figure, stepping up in his place.
Hello, Camilla! Hello, Queen Camilla! Hello!
With more scrutiny over the royal finances and a rather uncertain future for the Commonwealth, how might 2024 have shaped their image over the years to come?
The Commonwealth represents a third of humanity from all regions of the world, with all the different experiences, knowledge and aspirations that this brings.
Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills has, of course, been following it all. Rhiannon, let's start with the King. His year is a year that's really been defined by his health, hasn't it?
Oh, look, if anyone had said to me at the start of the year we would have 2 senior members of the royal family who were seriously ill, I would have just taken a step back and said, no, surely not, that can't happen. And that's what we faced. In January and February, we first of all had the King having his prostate procedure. And then we also had the Princess of Wales having to go in and have abdominal surgery. And then, of course, as the year went on, we then found out that he'd been diagnosed with cancer. We also found out with the Princess that cancer had been found after post-operative tests. I just think, for me, it was meant to be a year where we kind of had a reset, where there was meant to be a bit of normality. It's been a mad 5 years, hasn't it? We've had a change of reign. We had the coronation. We also had, don't forget, COVID. We had Harry and Meghan deciding to leave. Yeah. This year, I think, for me, was meant to be the King kind of setting out, ta-da, this is how I want to do monarchy. This is the kind of reign I want to have. And that was completely upended.
Were you surprised by the candour with which he spoke about his cancer?
Absolutely. And look, I've been standing outside of many hospitals waiting for updates on members of the royal family in terms of their health. And we have never had anything like this. We've always been told that kind of, yes, they are in for a procedure, but no details. And I think it was a very deliberate decision from the King himself that he wanted to be open about what was going on. So to start off with the prostate procedure, and then also being very open and honest about the fact that he had cancer and he was needing treatment. Look, he had to be honest because the doctors said to him, do you know what? You need to have a rest. You need to take a step back from public duties. And for him, I'm told that was a massive frustration. This is a man who loves his work. And look, people often talk about the 4 C's as kind of being pillars of his work. So let me try and get these. Climate, Commonwealth, culture, communities. But cancer was also added to that. So you have 5. And he was, I think, really trying to make a difference from a kind of public service messaging perspective when he couldn't really necessarily do anything else.
I mean, he certainly limited his public duties, but he wasn't completely absent from royal duties, far from it, in fact.
He's been described to me as a man who, look, if there's a 15-minute window in his diary, most of us would go, oh yeah, I'll have a coffee. He will fill it. He genuinely is a workaholic. Camilla often talks about that. And look, I was there at some of those first engagements when he was allowed to be back out on public duties. He genuinely seemed giddy. He seemed just delighted to be able to be back out talking to people. And yeah, I think it was really important for him. Everyone's cancer journeys are different, aren't they? And
absolutely.
And look, you've got to remember, he still has cancer.
Yeah.
Like we saw him at the state visit only recently. And you still have to remind yourself, this is a man who I am told is still having treatment for what was described to me as a managed condition. They're expecting the treatment to go on into the new year. But he still wants to be out and visible and, serving his country.
What effect, if any, do you think that diagnosis had on the way in which Charles has been and will be viewed by the British public? Because let's not forget, I mean, one of the consequences of the coronation itself was there really was a laser-sharp focus once again on the future of the monarchy.
I think probably since his 70th birthday, there's been a gradual softening towards him, I think. Look, if you weren't around in the 90s, then you probably don't have a full appreciation of just how much he was disliked for having an affair with Camilla, for the way that it was perceived that Diana was treated. I do think in recent years there's been a softening towards him. And certainly it was put to me that when he kind of transitioned from becoming prince to monarch, there may have been a perception that he would be, I don't know, less approachable. But I don't think that's happened. And actually this year, in a way, it's like he's been more tactile and more open. I don't know whether you remember that video of him, the New Zealand rugby players asking for a hug.
Yeah, we all want a hug, but I mean,
Hug?
yeah.
Why not?
A hug. And they all piled in for this massive hug. And as one of his team said to me today, look, the best communications secretary couldn't have kind of magicked that up.
And by his side, on the tours, and of course all the way through this cancer process, has been Camilla. I feel that she has been more visible this year. I'm just wondering if
She's had to be.
Well, that's it, whether it was entirely because she had to be, or whether, this was part of the plan all along as well.
Look, I think if you were maybe being cynical about it, it's been good for her because it has made her, as you say, much more visible. But there are a lot of people who have said, do you know what? It's been amazing what she's done, because don't forget, this is her husband who was diagnosed with cancer. And yet, as he was expected to kind of retreat from public life, she was expected to step up and on some occasions even lead the family. So I won't forget that the Commonwealth Day service, for example, she was there front and centre. Prince William was also there. But because of the way things are, she, as Queen, was expected to lead the family.
Do you think she enjoys it?
I'm not so sure. I think she certainly embraced that life, which in a way is amazing if you think that actually she didn't work for most of her life. She was a wife, someone in the army, she was a mother, and yet now, as effectively a pensioner, she's expected to kind of do the work. And I know there are some people who would say it's not necessarily work, but she's there.
Has would you then define her role? I mean, does she pursue her own interests as the Queen? Go on.
Yeah, so I think this has been another thing that's really stood out this year for her, was she did a documentary about her work on domestic violence.
Yeah.
And I think in the past that hasn't necessarily kind of cut through in the same way. She's been doing this for a very long time. This is not just kind of a pet project that she's just picked up this year. She's been deeply moved over the years by the women and the men that she has met who have faced the most awful abuse at home. And I think the documentary was good for her. I think it showed her genuine empathy, her warmth, and also the fact that she isn't afraid to stand up and talk about things which are still taboo, which still happen behind closed doors, and do whatever she can to elevate that cause. Look, don't forget, though, there are still people out there who don't necessarily acknowledge her as Queen.
Well, this is what I was going to say, because you say that Charles was a reviled figure in the 90s. I mean, arguably...
Oh, she's vilified.
Yeah, but arguably her ill-treatment at the hands of sections of the public and the media went on longer than his. I mean, do you think people view her now as Queen? Because, it took... Queen Elizabeth II saying, it is my wish that she be referred to in this fashion, for that to put into the public's mind that she wasn't simply going to be some consort, she was.
What Queen Elizabeth did was a masterstroke in terms of helping to future-proof and smooth out that transition so that there weren't questions about should she be queen. The whole idea of her being princess consort kind of disappeared very swiftly under the carpet, and no one's really questioned it ever since. what was interesting, I was standing outside of the hospital where the King was, the London clinic, and someone said to me, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Oh, we're waiting for the Queen to turn up." And they said, "But the Queen's dead." And I said, no, Queen Camilla. And I think there is still kind of a shift that needs to happen in some people's minds to fully acknowledge her as Queen, despite everything that the palace has done. And look, countries like America, where Diana is still held in such high regard, of course she is here as well, but certainly in America, I think there is kind of a dislike for Camilla that we don't necessarily have here.
Rhiannon, pause there. We'll be back in a moment.
The world is becoming increasingly complex and volatile. How can we make sense of it all?
I'm Richard Engel,
And I'm Yalda Hakim.
and we present Sky News' latest podcast, The World. Each week, we'll cut through the noise to guide you through the week's global events and explain to you why what happens out there matters to you wherever you are.
We're on the ground in some of the world's toughest places. Listen now to The World with Richard Engel and me, Yalda Hakim, wherever you get your podcasts.
2024 was another year in which we saw the Commonwealth as an institution not simply being an issue for the royal family, but actually being diminished. We've seen pro-Republican, anti-monarchy protests taking place along the various dates of the tour that they went on.
Not my king! Not my king! Not my king!
Does the palace actually have a strategy for dealing with this?
I think he has always, and this is when he was Prince of Wales and now as monarch, he's got a really clear line on this. And it hasn't shifted since he became king. And ultimately, it's always about a great fondness for the Commonwealth, a great appreciation of what the Commonwealth can be and what it means in terms of a talking shop. Every country, no matter what size, has a seat at the table. But ultimately, for him, when it comes to the Commonwealth realms and the future links with the royal family, he will always hold his hands up and say, "This is up to you."
Well, that's a statement of fact, though, isn't it?
It is, but I think he's very clear on it. I was in Barbados for the handover then, when Barbados became a republic. It was a really short 48-hour trip. But the overriding sentiment from that was, this is a new kind of relationship. There's going to be a shift in that relationship. But they are remaining part of the Commonwealth. And the ties are still there. The historic links are still there. The ties of friendship are still there. And ultimately, that's always what it comes down to with the royal family. As they travel around the world, it's about those foundations of friendship and remembering the common bonds to kind of move through more difficult times. I don't think he wants to hang on to the Commonwealth realms.
Those that don't want to be part of the Commonwealth anyway.
So the Australian Republic movement wrote to him before the Australia tour, and he wrote back through one of his representatives.
Obviously.
But ultimately saying it is a choice for Australia. But widely it was regarded that in Australia he was largely met by warm crowds. Yes, you cannot forget Lydia Thorpe standing up in Canberra and shouting at him.
Give us our land back. Give us what you stole from us. Our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people. You destroyed our land. Give us a treaty. We want a treaty in this country. You are a genocider.
And for many people, that was one of the standout moments of that trip. The palace would rather we looked at the huge crowds outside the Sydney Opera House. But I think also what it did for me was it showed that actually this isn't necessarily about whether places want him as king. It's actually about those historical issues around colonialism. And that is where the pain is, and that is where the hurt is, and where a lot of the protest comes from at the moment, I think.
I guarantee you and I will be talking again about the Commonwealth. I don't know if you and I will be talking about the royal finances. And that surprises me, because this year, Channel 4's Dispatches programme really cast a very unflattering light on the way in which the House of Windsor makes its money. And it makes millions, doesn't it?
Yeah, Duchy of Lancaster, obviously what funds the kind of private life of the monarch. Duchy of Cornwall funds the private life of the Prince of Wales. Look, it was not a good watch for the palace, especially at a time when I would say we have a monarchy that's trying to show that it is more socially engaged than ever before. I think sometimes these things, they can feel so complex. Like the royal finance it every year, my goodness, the sovereign grant is like head in hands time. Like, how do you unpick it all? But I think what the programme did was very clearly said, well, hang on a minute. The likes of the Ministry of Defence, the likes of the NHS are being charged money by the duchies. They are making money off the likes of them. And look at the properties. The properties are not kind of as environmentally friendly as they should be. And the problem for the royal family is this was kind of pinpointing all these different areas. Like William, for example, he's done his homelessness work this year, like the Homewards documentary. The King, for his birthday, was talking about food poverty and food waste. And
it does ring somewhat hollow when it's coming from someone who lives in a castle and goes to banquets every other night.
Yeah, and that, I think, is the difficulty for them, is how do they square that? William, in the documentary, especially around the homelessness issue, did try to kind of confront this whole thing of, well, you live in a palace. How can you possibly kind of talk about homelessness? I think it's always going to be, we are using our platform to try and shine a light. But I just think the fascinating thing with the finances is, for a group like Republic, who would rather we saw the back of this lot, you would think this was kind of going to be their big moment. I think, unfortunately for them, this is not necessarily the year where there is appetite to give the royal family a hammering. And I think partly that is because of their health issues and the sympathy that that's garnered.
Rhiannon, of course, this time of year, we're all looking to the message from the King on Christmas Day. But Christmas Day at Sandringham is going to be a bit different now, isn't it? Prince Andrew has landed himself in bother yet again, but this time with an alleged Chinese spy.
I know. What about the timing? It's awful. It's almost felt like this year it's been a bit quieter around Prince Andrew. There's still like this huge fascination, him and his finances, his contacts over the years. But yeah, certainly this story has blown up at a time of year when the royal family really could do without it. What he has done is he's actually done them a bit of a favour, because he's the one who's decided that he's not going to go to Sandringham, and neither is his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson. Last year, they both did go, and they were very public, and it was like, oh, there's this softening of relationships. And also, we need to remember that actually back in 2019, so after he did that awful interview about Jeffrey Epstein, he did go to Sandringham. He didn't do kind of the very public walk when members of the public were there, but we did see him walking with his brother Charles to church that morning. So it's amazing, really, that he's decided not to go.
Look, as you say, we have all these ongoing issues as regards his security and where he lives. We've got all the issues about him no longer being involved in frontline royal duties. And now he's not going to even be there for the Christmas dinner. What does that say about Andrew's relationship to Charles and to the family in general?
Do you know what? Everything I hear is that it's still close. He is still part of the family fold. And that's why it's fascinating that he's not going to be there at Sandringham, because every year that is the one moment in the calendar that we do normally see him publicly after he's had to completely retreat from public life. So normally it's a time that we see that he's not entirely been cast out into the cold. Everything that I always hear is that actually there is still this warm brotherly bond there between him and the king. I also have been told, though, that the king does not like confrontation. He is just like his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. So I suspect he's probably trying to swerve all of this as much as he possibly can. But someone who's known the king for a long time said that it is a real dichotomy for him now. Like, how much tolerance do you have to put up with these ongoing problems?
Well, that's the thing for Charles. I mean, Charles is monarch, and he is also something of a realist about the future of the House of Windsor. I mean, is that it for Andrew as a publicly facing royal now?
Yes, I think it is. Because we keep seeing these issues, don't we, coming up. And look, if you speak to anyone I spoke to one author who's been really deep in the weeds of trying to find out about Prince Andrew, his finances, his past business contacts, and keeps having doors basically shut in his face. It's really difficult to get any transparency about Prince Andrew and his past business dealings, past finances, and ultimately how he's now funding his lifestyle. Now, whenever you try and speak to the palace about it, they are very much, well, he's not a working royal anymore. It's not one for us. We're not the one to discuss this. He's got his own team. When it comes to his finances, well, that's all up to HMRC. When it comes to the funding of Royal Lodge, that is down to the people that manage the Crown estate. But I think what we see with the royal family is there is this line. He is still a member of the family. Those family events he will still be invited to. Over this Christmas period, one event that is kind of throwing a spanner in the works is the whole lunch at Buckingham Palace and whether or not he should be seen at that or not. The optics of him going into Buckingham Palace would be bad. But also what I'm always told is, family occasions, he's there as member of the family. If the king is at an event in his capacity as head of state, you will not see Andrew there.
That's your lot for today. But Rhiannon and I will be taking a look back at the year for Prince William and Catherine and what's also been a challenging year for the younger royals. We'll see you then.
The world is becoming increasingly complex and volatile. How can we make sense of it all?
I'm Richard Engel.
And I'm Yalda Hakim.
And we present Sky News' latest podcast, The World. Each week, we'll cut through the noise to guide you through the week's global events and explain to you why what happens out there matters to you wherever you are.
We're on the ground in some of the world's toughest places. Listen now to The World with Richard Engel and me, Yalda Hakim, wherever you get your podcasts.